Hello and welcome to SFI Not So Live with me, Jay Evans. I'm joined by Tony, as always. He's back from his holidays. Did you have fun?
I had a wonderful time, thank you.
We won't ask you any more about it. And joining us this month is Lee. Lee's been on the podcast before. Lee, just give us a quick introduction of who you are and what you do.
So I'm Lee Williams and newly promoted National Sales Manager at Saffron for Intermediaries. So
congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Well deserved.
Thank you.
Applause for that, well deserved. And welcome.
Thank you.
It's good to have you with us. And we've got a regular returning guest in Anna. Anna's back because Anna's analysis of elections, I think, has become our new favourite thing. So we had to have you back this time. So Anna, welcome. Just a quick introduction.
My name's Anna. I'm a Deputy Editor for Mortgage Solutions and Editor of Specialist Lending Solutions. And I haven't really been sleeping a lot since the election was done. So it's been very fun.
I am very much looking forward to hear your analysis. And we're also joined by a very special guest for the first time, Rahul. Just to the camera for us, a quick introduction of who you are and where you work.
Sure. I'm Rahul Nath, and I head up the large loans for L&C mortgages.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
First time. I know you're a little bit nervous, but there's no reason to be. All right, we're
sure,
just here to have a discussion.
Absolutely.
Just a caveat to me before we start. Anything you do here on this podcast are our own personal opinions, not that necessarily that of our employers. And we're here to continue the election theme, aren't we? So last time we were here with, Tony wasn't here, but we were here with Phil. I was here with Phil. No one else was here. I was here with Phil, and we were talking about what we expected from them. And we've had a bit of time now. Labour are now in power. We're starting to see some movements and some changes. And this is going to be our analysis of what we've seen so far. Well, yours. I'm just here to ask the questions. So let's start off. And just a quick question. Let's start with you, Tony. What's mood been like since things changed? Really, what are we, 22 days in?
I've been away for a lot of it. No, for me, I think it's an air of expectancy. Yep. You know, we're seeing lots of promising comments, which is easy to say. It's not so easy to deliver. So I think it's when we really start getting into the delivery of policy that they're suggesting is when it'll happen. From our perspective, the lending perspective, it's quite a quiet time in the market. We're seeing rates dropping. We're seeing, hopefully expectations of a base rate cut potentially. So it's kind of just a bit of to use the words, a bit of a phony war at the moment. It's kind of a bit of a hiatus whilst everything kind of settles down. The new ministers get into their roles, and we take it from there. So that's kind of my view on it. Anyway.
It's the honeymoon period, isn't it?
Yeah.
But has the industry responded? Or are we waiting? As Tony says, we've not got a Bank of England meeting until
it's next
after
week.
this goes out.
Thursday.
So it's
next
just,
week. I'd kind of say it's. It's kind of cautiously optimistic. So it's that kind of air of expectancy. They're saying a lot of promising things. And they're putting planning and housing at the centre of a lot of the stuff that they're talking about, like Chancellor Rachel Reeves' maiden speech. About 2/3 of it was planning and housing, so I kind of was tuning into it. And normally it's like housing and stuff is a bit of a footnote, or it's like it's a back burner consideration. Whereas actually most of the speech is planning and housing. That's really interesting. So I think, but a lot of the stuff that they're saying that they're going to do, like building 1.5 million homes, a lot of planning reform is going to take a lot of time to kind of get off the ground.
They don't seem to be shy about talking about it, though.
No,
there's been a lot of chat. They're defending it and they're arguing their case, and even against the Conservatives. I was listening to Prime Minister's questions. Keir Starmer went back hard and said, "Look, if we're going to grow our economy, we've got to do this." So it seems like they're trying.
They're kind of really leaning into it a lot more. Whereas I think the Conservatives were just like, they obviously did have like levelling up and all that kind of stuff, but it did feel a bit more like a lot of ideas, or a lot not like that, whereas Labour seem to be saying we are really going to try and push it. But again, the first 100 days we'll see, whereas we're only 22 days in at this point. So
very good. So let's go. Coming over to you then, Lee. What's the market been like? Tony said the rate's starting to drop. There must be some interest, but it's again that time of year, isn't it? It's not necessarily the busiest time of year.
I mean, from a broker point of view, and obviously Rahul's going to have points as well, but I think that the conversations I'm having is that they're very hopeful that a drop in the base rate could lead to demand that's basically there but not proceeding yet. There's a lot of customers sat waiting to see what happens, and obviously rates now going below 4% with some of the high street lenders is probably getting some people to sit up and go, maybe now is the right time. So I think that's a good point, that some brokers that maybe haven't been as busy are finding themselves to be a little bit busier with customers actually looking to proceed. But we're still not where you'd expect to be with the pent-up demand. And I do personally think that a lot of customers will be looking at the base rate. And don't get me wrong, I appreciate that doesn't always represent a reduction in mortgage rates, because swap rates and other things will have a big impact. But I think customers will be looking for that base rate to think now that's the right time, potentially.
Yes, I was going to say, actually, with a lot of some lenders that I've been speaking to, they're saying, well, actually, we've already kind of priced in, or kind of the market's already expecting base rate cuts. So it's not like there's going to be a massive, huge, there are going to be like reductions and kind of tweaks in pricing, but I don't think it's going to be like everything's going to go back down to 2%, which maybe some customers might expect. So I think it's kind of on brokers to really explain that and say, look, I know that the base rate has been cut. That's great, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get like a sub 2% mortgage.
No, absolutely. The unicorn is not going to magically appear, as So yeah, definitely.
Well, just based on what Lee said.
Do
you agree?
I do. I think everyone's sort of covered most of the points. I think, we've seen a few cuts in the rates nationwide. It's come up with the sub 4%. I think kind of expect more lenders to cut their rates a little bit more. What I'm seeing probably is a bit more stability in terms of how customers are thinking now. Probably a bit more properties are back on the market now, so I can see that happening. But I agree completely in the sense that this perception that the rates are going to drop dramatically, it's probably not going to happen straight away. And I think
do you think that is customers' perception? Do you think
I think there's a general perception? Yes,
and I think it's kind of backed up with a lot of stories that stories in the media saying like, oh, but mortgage rates will drop when the base rate goes down. They're kind of really putting those two together, and it's not that they're not going to fall. It's just they're not going to. It's not going to be like a.
It's not like you can see an avalanche of things going down.
Or I hope not, just for my own sanity.
And I think just to add to that, I don't think it's mentioned enough. Term funding is coming to an end as well, so that will also play a part in the pricing. So typically, that cheap funding, which was available to lenders, to a lot of lenders.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got to be repaid by next year.
By next year. So
yeah, absolutely.
You've got that to be factored in. So I think it's cautious optimism in the market, I think, at this stage.
Yeah.
Let's stay on the base rate then. Let's get your crystal balls out, guys. What are we going to get next week? What do you think is going to happen?
I don't think it'll change. I think it'll be September, personally. I think it's just a little bit... Let's get the summer kind of out of the way, because the problem is as soon as we get a day of sunshine, everybody's going to be out blowing all the money, and we'll just see it rising. So I think they'll hold it, personally, for another month. But the contrary says, actually, is pressure being applied to put a feel-good in, new government. They are independent, I clearly state that. However, influence can be exercised. It might be the factor that's needed, but let's see. Yeah. I don't think it will change.
I think some people on the Monetary Policy Committee have said, actually, we'd prefer it to be September rather than August. And I mean, obviously, there are several people on that committee, and, it just has to be a majority vote. So, but I do think that if inflation is proving a little bit stickier, and especially with all the stuff going on about civil, public sector pay, and that's kind of them saying, oh, there might be a 5% pay rise, or Rachel Reeves kind of said, oh, we're like nothing's off the table really, and I think there's a fear that will kind of mean wage inflation remains quite stubborn, or there's a bit of a concern in the markets about that. So I think maybe they're going to wait until September.
But housing's so high on the agenda at the moment. We were just talking about this before we went live. It's so high on the agenda that actually everything that happens now is going to be really scrutinised and watched. But with the budget coming up, or a small budget coming up from Rachel Reeves, maybe she does want it to be September. Yeah. So she can say that actually she's had some influence over that.
Yeah.
Also, it'll give her more credibility.
She's formerly worked at the Bank of England, so she kind of knows. Yeah.
She knows her way around.
Knows how to, she knows how it works, and also because she has that economist background, I think she's gonna, and also something very strange that I didn't realise she's like a former chess champion, like a chess prodigy. So she is very strategic.
I did know that, yeah.
And she is, so I think she can think more she's going to be thinking a bit more long term, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the way the voting's been split over the last few months, it's been quite consistently 7-2. So I think it's going to take another month before that splits.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that, really, to be honest, because service inflation is still proving to be a bit sticky.
Yeah.
So I think that seems, if I was to put my money, I would do it on September rather than August, I think.
Seems like people agree. I'm just looking at the stories that I pulled together before this, and people seem to agree there'll be 2 cuts before the end of the year, but that one of them will not be August. That's the majority
some people have said, "Oh, there's going to be 3," but I think that's a bit over ambitious.
I don't think so.
Personally, but that's just me.
I think.
Hey, look, I don't mind because I'm on a tracker, so I'll have them all. But
Here we go. It's all Tony's thinking for himself.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking.
Yeah?
I really does. As we should. Let's start then to pick apart some of the things they're talking about, some of the things they want to do. I want to start on the 1.5 million homes because they're stuck to it. They're still talking about it. So, they've got a lot to build and they've got a lot to do. Is it a feasible thing? Or is it a gimmick? Because literally somebody, I can't remember, it was on Talk TV or something, or Talk Radio, I just happened to see on YouTube on the way down here, said that they think it's impossible to achieve. Will we go that far?
I've heard the same thing as well. I mean, if you look at that number of properties with the amount of skilled labour we've got, it's not just about planning. It's also about who's actually going to build the properties and is there enough quantity surveyors. And I was listening to, after the election, I was listening to 5 Live and they were debating this, and there were so many people talking about, and I did a bit of research afterwards, the fact that we don't have as many skilled workers makes it potentially impossible to achieve. We've got all the other things that we need to do, which I don't understand the plan yet. It's almost like this is the
There's a lot of chat, but there's not a lot of detail.
Yeah,
You still
I'd love to know.
the detail.
It's like I know the destination, but I don't know the roadmap.
Yeah.
Well, it's in the Chancellor's maiden speech, she was kind of like, "Oh, we're consulting on a national planning policy framework, and that's due at the end of the month, which is the end of July." But then, I was kind of listening to the speech, kind of hoping that there would be like, okay, so maybe not like this is exactly the framework that we're going to do, but I was kind of hoping for a bit more detail. And I mean, I know that they said, "Oh, we've already given the green light to some developments in Sutton Coldfield." I think it was Sutton Coldfield, Worcester, and Liverpool. So that's 14,000 homes that we've already unlocked. And I'm just like, yeah, but they're not built yet. You're kind of acting like they're built,
acting like
they're not.
Yeah.
And it's also kind of off the back of your point of it's not, it's the skilled labour, but it's also just making sure the infrastructure's there as well. Because there's no point building houses if there's not like shops or proper public transport, or if it's in places that people want to live.
Yes.
So.
Well, this is where the new towns thing comes in.
Yeah, I mean,
they're still sticking with this. I thought that might disappear, but they're still sticking with it. They did it. Milton Keynes is a prime example, isn't it? It was a new town. It was built for the purpose of developing more homes and developing areas. And actually, it's one of the nicest places to go around in a car, to be fair. And it's a well thought out town. That could be a way of them delivering this. No, anyone agree? Or?
I do think it is. I think they've got a lot of good ideas of building on brownfield sites and Greybelt and like new towns and stuff. But I do think that the Conservatives struggled. They never struggled to build 300,000 homes a year. They never actually met that target whilst it was in place. And you are, in a lot of, I feel like, it's just my personal opinion, a lot of people who voted Labour are kind of Conservative voters who do not necessarily want a lot of developments in their areas. They just kind of were sick of the Tories and wanted them out. So I do feel like maybe I understand why they, I think it's a good thing to kind of push for development, but I think you might alienate a lot of people who voted for them because they're kind of like, no, but I want my green fields and green belt, and I don't want loads of building work and clogging up my roads and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know.
I think the 1.5 million is I think it's over the next
Parliament. Yeah. So it's not in the next 6 months. So it's a feasible. It's a feasible time period, I suppose.
I think it's a feasible time period. So. But it's the devil's in the detail, isn't it? So we still need to know exactly what they mean by that and how they're going to...
And the type of home, sure.
And the type of homes. And there's a huge stress on affordable housing, for instance, and how that pans out. And then it's also the Renters' Rights Bill, which they're looking to bring in. So that kind of sort of feeds into what this whole housing market's going to look like, etc. So, but if anyone was to learn from history, then I would think that Labour's probably learned its lesson in terms of coming out with something which is either not deliverable or within the timescales, and they'll be cautious about it. So I don't think we're going to see anything till sort of maybe a bit of it in the autumn budget. but nothing till, say, next spring, till we really get a feel for what exactly is going to happen. That's my perception anyway.
I have a theory on the skills side of things, and where we're going to get skilled people from. In that Ursula and Keir Starmer are meeting, is it in a week, 2 weeks' time? Whenever it's very soon, isn't it? And I think that is going to be some movement, freedom of movement to allow skills to come back in. That's
funny enough, that's where a lot of the skill went.
Yeah,
because we told them we didn't want you here. Which is a madness. Anyway, we won't get deep into that.
No,
back to the building houses. Obviously, the 300,000 is just this figure that's been plucked since the last time it was delivered in 1979, and that's because we were building a lot of social housing at that point. For me, though, it isn't. We're asking how can you build 300,000 houses. To me, it's actually how many houses are already built that are empty.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's not about necessarily building brand new houses. It's about repurposing. There's whole streets in certain areas of the country that, with regeneration, could provide immensely good affordable housing for people, or even, private rental, or even, whole open market sales.
Prime example in Norfolk, Debenhams has been converted into 250 flats. I'm surprised you can get 250 flats out of Debenhams, but you forget the floor space. When it's a 3-storey building in the middle of a town centre, they're all going to be affordable.
Exactly. So it's about repurposing existing infrastructure as well as building the appropriate homes in the appropriate places. So I think it's I hope that they consider all of that. But it's, as you said, I'm waiting to see, because we've been hearing this a lot over the last 14 years and not seeing a lot of change. Let's hope this is the opportunity to deliver.
There's something that has seen a bit of growth. You and I like to talk about it quite a lot, especially you, and that is self and custom build.
Absolutely.
Is that a way of getting some of these numbers done? As you put it in the hands of smaller developers and smaller people to get it done, rather than relying on the full.
Absolutely. As I say on every podcast, self-build and custom build is Britain's 4th largest builder, and that figure is only growing. It's not instead of, in terms of house building, it is part of a suite of solutions that the government needs to consider in its building targets. It's around 12 to 15,000 a year, and that number could easily grow to 20, 30,000 in the right enabler. It needs a lot of education. It needs the planning reform to put the single self-builder on the same basis as a national house builder or an equivalent large speculative house builder. But the opportunities are there, and it's good for the country because generally they are built by local people using local trades and local materials. They are also proven to be between 8 and 43% more environmentally efficient than speculative house building. So it's a big opportunity, but it's not instead of, it is a complementary to the overall strategy.
You see a lot more talk, Anna, about self and custom build.
It's something that's kind of, it's starting to kind of become talked about a little bit more. Like I know you guys kind of talk about it a lot, but we did just get some, we are getting I'm seeing more kind of press releases and reports coming through on self-build and custom build, but it is, from like, when I say like we're seeing more, it's like we're actually seeing some press releases and stuff about self, whereas before it was a kind of, if I wanted to, I had to kind of really go out and ask for that, like, oh, I'm doing a piece on this, can I get some commentary on it? It wasn't necessarily something that people were shouting about a lot, but it does, people are kind of actually saying, actually this could really help with the house building target. Like, is there a way that we can increase it or improve it, or kind of what are the barriers to this that we can address? So it is starting, that is, now that we're kind of like the, all the new government's in, then now people are actually kind of thinking about, okay, so how can we meet this target? So yeah, it's starting to come through a bit.
There's a perception element. I'm going to ask you this question and come to Royal as well, because you're last interested. But the perception is all grand design stuff. We've had this conversation so many times. Yeah. Everyone thinks you're going to sell, but you're going to build this huge, great container-made home made of toughened glass and glass floors. That's not necessarily what it is it? And day to day.
No, it's definitely not. We do see some of those. Don't get me wrong. It's lovely when
you
see
some of
those. Yeah,
lovely.
I'm very nosy. I love seeing them. But we do also see, properties that they build to purpose for their family, which actually don't need glass flooring and lovely staircases. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure they're lovely in other ways, but we are seeing more traditional built, maybe under a more modern form of construction, timber frame being one of them, but yeah, it doesn't have to be the grand designs. And the problem is they would never go on grand designs, a lot of them, because they would be too boring to watch.
Because they're actually
Yeah,
well-managed
Because
projects.
it's a normal house.
Yeah,
and it's priced well and it completes, and they actually move in.
It's like if there's no drama about like actually it was going to take 6 months and it's taken a year and we've gone double over the budget and the builders have left. And
I think it does get the wrong perception, doesn't it? And I think that's what I'm getting at. It's not that dramatic.
No, and also I think that buyers, the more education they get, actually they're seeing when they build their own property, it's a great investment. The value of that property once built compared to what they actually put into it tends to be that they've got a house they wouldn't actually normally be able to afford.
So actually, being a first-time buyer, to self-build, you could probably have better than you would ever get if you went onto a market and built a home.
Classic example.
Immediately, you can build something you can live in for a long period of time.
A lot of the time, it doesn't have to be a ground-up development as well. It could be a barn, not a barn, let's say a bungalow that's where they're taking the roof off and building up. They're in an area where they would never have been able to buy the 4-bedroom house that they're now turning it into, but actually the price difference may have been, say, 200 and the build's 50,000.
Yeah.
It's massive. And now they're on the street they want to be on in a house they would never have been able to afford. So see that day in, day out. So it's not the grand designs in the main. Yeah. It's actually really, really achievable. But education is so key in this area, and ease of being able to get through planning and have the right expertise.
Yeah. We're so quick to talk about self-build, but custom build, I think, is the thing I'm most excited about. Because I think Tony, you've said 100 times, like in Germany, you get like a catalogue of homes you can build from, and actually, it's a developer developing several loads of houses. You kind of the buyer just kind of adjusts their house to what they want.
And custom build will fit more likely with what the government is saying about using brownfield and using inner city and using previously, undesirable sites, because custom build can build flats, apartments. It doesn't have to be just housing, so there is huge opportunity. And you're right, in Germany, as I said, there's one website where you can pick from 2,300 house designs. Wow. And this
like
is
The Sims. It's
just this is the thing. We deliver 7% of our housing in the UK by self and custom build. The average developed country is at 40%. Wow. And the highest, I think, is Austria at 60% currently. So when Keir's over talking to our European friends, you can learn a few things there. But it's a different psyche. I've said before, we're institutionalised into this build model where it's the Stalinist state. Somebody else tells us where I'm going to live and what I'm going to live in. That's not right, is it? And there's an opportunity to do more. And custom build, I think, once people understand that actually it's self-build, but somebody's doing it for you, an experienced, builder will do that bit for you, but to the design that you want, and not at twice the cost. I think that's when it will hopefully take shape.
Yeah,
love that. Okay, sorry.
No, it's fine. I think the large loan side of things, what I have seen recently is that there are probably bargains to be had. Yeah. So it's probably not ground up building from scratch. But we've seen properties being bought where it's on a freehold, 3 flats. They're buying that, converting that into one dwelling, for instance, or indeed converting 2 flats into a dwelling. So I think that I'm seeing more of now than I have seen previously. So I think there is definitely an entry into the market. Would convert
it to a HMO or kind of like make it like actually subdivide it more. But
But actually, that is actually cost effective to do that as well. That's interesting.
And I think that's where there are certain areas in London, for instance, where there are planning restrictions on how many flats you can convert to a main dwelling, etc. So I think all of those legislations will also play a part in terms of how you kind of push this market.
Yeah. It really does. It is all about planning reform. They've talked about it. That's all I hear. Every time I turn on any news program, politics program, all I'm hearing is planning this, planning that. Let's see how much they actually do, because we know for a fact, we all say it all the time, that planning needs the biggest kick up the butt ever.
Well, it really is. I mean, I've just taken over, or recently, our development finance part of the business, and that's been a real eye-opener to actually the rigour and rigmarole developers have to go through. We were talking to our one of our quantity surveyors, he was talking to us about how they do their role, and the first thing they do is send out an information request to any of developers, and it's got 17 bits on it, and it's quite in depth, but that's what's needed to get a house, a spade in the ground. You know, it shouldn't have to be that hard, I think, is the
I mean,
is the
I
answer.
know that Rachel Reeves said they want the 300 extra planning officers across the UK. But it is that kind of like, okay, where are you gonna find
Where are you
these
finding these
people?
people?
Where,
Yeah.
where are they gonna get their train? You know, like
Yeah.
how quickly can you get them like up to you know, train them up and get them out there?
You also
But I
need-
still think it's a good, you know, it's great, but you know, until their boots are on the ground,
Well,
it's not.
look, it's always the way, isn't it, Lee? We have this conversation all the time. With you either have a really skilled process and need skilled people, or you dumb down your process so that anybody can do it under a strict set of guidelines.
But I
One's a lot faster than the other.
Yeah, I suppose the thing is, you know, if you do dumb down the process, then you know, corners can be cut. And
Absolutely,
that
look,
creates
there-
its own
It goes
problems like
all
later
ways.
down
there's
the
a
line.
Yeah.
there's a limit, isn't there? I think the biggest thing for me, though, which always surprises me, is every single local authority planning portal is different. There is no uniformity in the planning. You can't just go onto a planning and put in the planning reference. You have to go onto that individual council website, which is madness.
It's integrated, isn't it?
I can't remember. It's not specifically planning, but it was something. Well, I suppose it is planning. It was. I was talking to buy-to-let broker about converting to HMOs, and he was saying, "Oh, there's this specific section that some councils have. That means that you have to get this extra permission to convert to a HMO." And I was like, "Oh, is that just like? I'm assuming there's just a national database where you can just search. Oh, these are all." It's like, no, you have to go into each individual council and find. And I'm just like, that just seems really silly. Like,
And the way we are, and the way we are with technology, and how quickly you
Yeah.
can change things. How are we still in this position? How have they not done this? How have they not started? Apparently, there is some things in the background started, but you just don't know about it. But you led very beautifully on to the next one. We talk about buy to let, but just to quickly lay out, I've just got the Financial Reporter had a lovely article which just helpfully listed what they've said, and you've talked about most of them. Is to create new towns, 1.5 new homes, a million new homes, should we say? Rethink the green belt. We've already had conversations about that. Mandatory house building targets reintroduced across all local authorities. 40% have to be affordable housing, according to Angela Rayner. You're right, 300 additional planning officers to fix a broken system. And this can be funded by taxing foreign buyers. So our expat buy-to-lets are not going to be in the best of moods without that one, I'm sure. Freedom to buy scheme with funded deposits. First dibs for local people on new developments to perhaps counter some of the backlash. Reform of compulsory purchase rules to get home. So there's quite a lot in there. On the stamp duty threshold, first-time buyers threshold from 425 down to 300,000 by April 2025. We'll talk about that in a minute because that's on our list of stories. But you did quite nicely lead me on to my next one, which is what was the Renters Reform Bill.
yes.
We talked about this quite heavily on the last podcast. Sadly, none of you were here. But it was something we talked about quite heavily. But it looks like they've got their Renters' Rights Bill. Annie, you probably know more about this than I do.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem to be resurrecting a lot of stuff that was in the Renters Reform Bill into this bill. So ban on no-fault evictions. And I think they've also I just printed off what we said. And reforming grounds for possession seem to be the two big big things that they kind of looking to showcase. I do think that with the no fault evictions, the reason that the Renters Reform Bill kind of stalled, apart from the calling of the election, obviously, was because they wanted to do a review into whether the court system could cope with no fault evictions being scrapped. And I do think the Labour's probably going to have to do that review in order to progress it. But hopefully I would, in trying to be more positive, hopefully because they kind of saw where the potholes were in the previous legislation, hopefully they can navigate that a bit better, or they can be like, okay, we can get that off the.
They had that groundwork done for them
before you kind of put a roadblock. I can go around it because I know that that's coming.
I think they're looking
hope.
to, yeah, exactly, abolish Section 21, aren't they?
Yeah.
But sort of on the face of it, it sounds quite scary from a landlord's point of view. But I think it's only 6% that's actually repossessed that way or taken back that way. So probably it's not as severe as it sounds.
It does make there's all this talk about Section 21. It does make you feel like everyone thinks all landlords are bad, and I think that's a horrible thing at the moment. It's tarnishing all good landlords. There are a lot. We talk about this a lot. There are a lot of good private landlords.
Exactly.
I think that was a Paragon survey, which was basically just like, I think it was something like two-thirds or higher. I might have to double check, but it's just like basically like the majority of renters actually have a good relationship with their landlords, and they actually kind of like, they're not all landlords are kind of cash grabbing and kind of be like, oh yeah, just live in this damp and mouldy flat. I'm not going to do anything. Most landlords I know are very proactive, very considerate of their renters, but you do have a minority that are still kind of just being like, I have loads of them. I mean, there always will be, but I think it is about kind of shrinking that down.
Yes, getting that percentage of them down. Let's just quickly, I'm quickly run through, Tony, I've got a question for you in a second. I'm just going to read through what they're going to do. Strengthen tenants' rights and protections, make it easier for tenants to keep pets subject to landlord approval, introduce a decent home standards and apply Arab's law, which we all know what that is, that young lad. Create a digital private rented sector database, which I think is interesting. Introduce a new property ombudsman, which I think is definitely needed. Propose anti-discrimination measures and strengthen local council enforcement powers. So that's on a quick list. Do you think it's going to put off the buy-to-let sector, Tony? It's a big part of your business, isn't it?
It is a big part of our business. Will it put it off? It'll put the ones off that haven't got the right attitude, which is a good thing. Look, I think it's potentially another nail in the coffin of the part-time landlord, the ones that with one property or whatever, but we've seen the demise of that over recent years anyway. I think for the professional landlords, it only can be positive because it's improving the professionalism of the private rented sector. You're on this. You've got more skin in the game. You're on the hook to do more things, quite rightly, and it will hopefully weed out those ropey landlords. Which is in the minority, but they do exist. So look, all of this it's great saying it. Let's see it, and let's start understanding the impact. But I don't think it's bad news. No. For the sector. I think anything that strengthens standards to me is a good thing, as long as it doesn't block natural growth. I think is the key for me.
Well, growth is their big word, isn't it? So they're going to be looking very carefully at making sure whatever they do doesn't put off any sector of the market, and everyone to be bolstered.
I think consolidation in that sector, I completely agree, Tony. It's going to take probably the smaller ones out of the equation. Also, it'd be interesting to see how the capital gains tax plays out. Because that's another bit of it which will probably impact the smaller landlords more than the others, especially and what the
Also interesting if they decide to go through with furnished holiday let scheme being removed, because I think that was going to come in next year.
That's right.
So then, because that was a Conservative government in their spring statement, so I don't know. I've kind of been, but the Labour government haven't said anything about that yet. So it's a reminder to myself to actually follow up and just be like, sir.
Check it, yeah.
So we very quickly touched on it, but I just want to talk about it a little bit in this stamp duty move. I'm not going to use the word reform because it's not reformed at all. It's just dropping a threshold, but it's going to be harder for first-time buyers. It's dropping from 450,000 back down to the original 300,000. It's put up temporarily, wasn't it?
So it's set to kind of go back to its original threshold in April next year. There was actually a story I wrote up this morning before I came here from Rightmove, where they were just like saying that 37% of homes, when it goes back to that, won't be eligible. 37% of homes for sale, I have to get this right, won't be eligible for that first-time buyer stamp duty relief, which actually, if you think about it, is quite a huge swathe of houses where first-time buyers, might not be able to get any stamp duty relief, and then they'll have to, considering the average asking price for a house, the stamp duty is about £3,500. That, from paying nothing to 3,500 is significant, jump, especially if you're already struggling to save for the deposit and everything. I know that the Tories said in their manifesto that they were going to make that permanent. So I don't know if Labour might just kind of borrow that and just kind of, because there is sometimes a bit of a back and forth of just like borrowing other people, kind of being like, oh, that's a good idea, I'm going to take that. But I don't know. The stamp duty definitely needs reform of some description, but I feel like everyone's been saying that for a very long
Do you feel
time.
like we all agree that it needs some reform?
But it's not only just first-time buyers. It's the whole look. I'm looking to move house, and the kind of houses I'm looking at stamp duty of £40,000. Just and how can you? I don't understand stamp duty as a government tax anyway. It's that's not encouraging you to keep a fluid housing market, because a lot of people go, I don't want to pay that for nothing. Yeah. So for me personally, again, it's all about me, I'd like it removed. But I just think it needs reform, and I think the whole taxation system and understanding what's fair, what isn't. And I know stamp duty at that higher end only impacts a very small minority of the population, so that's the justification, I suppose. But it just needs a good look. But we don't need concessions or special ideas, because we know what that does. That just creates the boom, and everybody has a problem. So I think it needs to be more, as you say, institutional
on the downsizing
change.
side of stuff. I think that's kind of like a real something I hear quite a lot. Is actually it's also at the beginning and at the end of just kind of actually encouraging people to, maybe move to a smaller property or move.
But that's
so
what
then that actually you can then put that house on for sale, and then a second step or a first time buyer can buy it, rather than if you have to pay like that.
But that's literally what we're looking.
Actually, I just wanted to move into a smaller property, but it's not worth it if I have to pay that much.
Which is exactly our position. My kids are grown up. We're looking at reducing the house size, and it's you're priced out of it from a stamp duty perspective.
I think one of Labour's sort of things is the mortgage guarantee scheme, making that permanent. I would rather they focus on the stamp duty side of things and made that more permanent. I think that would boost.
Yeah, I do think the mortgage guarantee scheme is quite limited in it's, hey, look, first time buyer scheme, it's always good to help some people get on the ladder, but it's not actually, it's only helping like a small proportion of first time buyers. I think it was, I have to double check, but I think it's only like 20. No, I'm actually not going to try and pull a number out, because but it's kind of like of the kind of like all the first time buyers, it's like such a small percentage.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like stamp duty would help a lot more people rather than that small kind of fraction.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
We're running out of time, but I just want to go back to the house building again. I'm gonna sit in Phil's seat for a minute, because we did touch on social housing. What have you heard? I've been trying to find some kind of stat from Angela Rayner on how much social housing is going to be built. 40% affordable is also all they've given away. But where's the social housing? They're Labour. Labour are renowned for building social housing. That's what they're about. Are we ever going to see this?
I mean, it is that thing of, I was trying to find, this is like, oh yeah, but we're going to build a lot of social housing, a lot of affordable housing, and then I'm just like, but yeah, what's the
Where
number?
is it?
What's the number? Where, that kind of thing. So again, I think they might announce. I have a feeling they might announce some more stuff once they've done that national planning policy framework thing at the end of the month, and then they might use that to kind of be like, oh, look at all, here's the more detail that you asked for. But there hasn't been, she's been pressed several times on that specific number, and she's not really being drawn on it. But
they're being very clever. You listen to Angela Rayner, you listen to our new Chancellor, and you can tell they're being cautious of what they're saying and being very clever about what they say. But also they're being very doom-mongering about where we are and saying, well, we've walked in now, we've seen the state of the books, and actually it's worse than it was. Do you think they're managing the public expectations, or do you think this is actually real? Do you think they didn't see some of the red?
I think they probably didn't see like some of the smoke coming from under the hood, and then they kind of opened it with just like, oh wow, this is worse than we thought. But I think there is a part of it where they are probably kind of lowering expectations a little bit, so then they can surprise people, or so that they can have that. I do feel like
I don't know if it's going
worse.
The other way, and whether or not they're going to go, actually, we are going to have to put your tax up. I think that's where we're going.
Yeah.
I'm probably a pessimist, and I am a pessimist when it comes to politics, as we know. But I feel they're preparing us for a hike on all of us. I don't know why. It must have been, and then that worries me about.
Look, how else do you fund all the things they're going to change unless you raise the simplest, easiest way of funding, which is taxation?
Yeah.
How else you can do it?
But there are other people in tax rather than middle and lower classes.
But it's always us. It's always us that gets stuff.
Yeah, of course it's.
It's always us. That's just the way it is. It is what it is, as they say on Love Island.
as we, I wouldn't know. I've never watched an episode in my life.
Until it isn't, which is the best way.
You've
can
got
edit
Love
that
Island
out.
in the podcast. I'm impressed, Tony. I'm actually impressed. Okay, we've got a few minutes left, so let's just go around the room. I just want your predictions on. We've got an upcoming budget and what we're going to see. Are you feeling optimistic about the next few months in this first part of Parliament? Do you feel that we've got a little bit of sensibility into politics, and people are starting to take us a bit more seriously, or is it a honeymoon period and actually it's going to fall off a cliff? And how do you think the market's going to react after what could be in the budget? It's quite a long-winded and thoughtful question there, but your prediction.
Come to me last.
Yeah, Tony did a little while. The steam coming out of his ears already. I can feel it. But no, there must be some air of optimism because things have changed. But how short-term is it? Are you feeling confident that we could, Lee, I'm going to come to you first. Are you feeling confident we could see over the next few months a little bit more positivity coming out of politics?
I'm not convinced, if I'm honest. I think it's difficult. I think a lot of people are actually just disengaged with it right now until you actually give us some hard facts. And the problem with noise is that it's always changing. And I think that's where most of our population is. You know, I think a lot of the vote proved that in some ways. The vote was down. There wasn't as many people voting. And I think a lot of that is because actually, I think a lot of people are disengaged with what are you actually going to achieve? Are we going to get a load of promises? Can you back up those promises? And like we talked about a lot today, actually the detail is what we need. And until we get that detail, I don't think we can be that much positive. I want to be. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I really want to be. But yeah, I need to see the detail.
I think we're in a honeymoon period at the moment. So I do think, you know, Keir Starmer, you know, having his call with Biden and going and inviting all the European leaders, and which Rishi Sunak had actually organised, and then
He just turned up as a different person.
And then
Turn that
doing,
bad
you know,
boy
they
in a
just
minute.
seem, you know, they've been a lot of really, you know, they have kind of seemed to have tried to hit the ground running as fast as much as possible, rhetoric wise, of just being like, right, this is our plan, you know. It's still a bit woolly, but we're just like we are planning, and we're moving in this direction. But I think it will kind of be crunch time when it comes to the budget, and then also I think there's a bit of a emotional thing. It's like right now, this is going to sound really silly, but it's like it's summer, you know, everyone's a bit more optimistic, but then when you come to winter, it's rainy, it's, you know, it's miserable, your bills, you know, heating bills are going up, this is going up, and, you know, stuff doesn't seem to be changing. Then I think that they're going to have something to show to kind of keep that optimism going by, you know, I don't know what that will be, but I kind of, that you might need to have something to show to kind of be like, it's not all bad. I know it's kind of like rainy and your energy bills are still really expensive, but we've done this thing.
I'm trying to be as positive as I possibly can. So I think there's some natural buoyancy in the market currently, right? Inflation's low, possible base rate cuts. Typically, every time there's a new election, a big majority, so they can push things through. There's been a slight increase in house prices. So I think there's a natural buoyancy in the market at the moment. There's a bit of stability. And I'm hoping that buoyancy kind of carries through till we actually see the devil in the detail. So I'm quite optimistic, but again, don't know enough to predict the future. But I think in the very, very short term, there's a bit of natural buoyancy which will see us through.
Tony?
Yeah, I agree with all my fellow panelists, to be fair. But no, I mean, I think the buoyancy's there. You can see it's definitely shoots there. But from Lee's side, look, trust in government, regardless of the colour, is not there. You know, the previous government certainly didn't help that with all the scandals with COVID. But trust not there. So I think most people are going to be agnostic until we see what happens. And like anything in life, until you know that what's in it for me moment, it's largely, it's just noise. So once I see that impact, either beneficially or not beneficially on my ability to do what I want to do in life, then that's the point when you see the difference, I suppose. So we don't know enough. Let's hope it's all positive and it's a whole new way to govern. Let's Yeah, I'm not convinced, but let's hope. And yeah, but I think from market side, it's a positive market. House, you know, I think there's something the other day I saw earlier. There's house instructions are 22.8% up on previous years. So more people are looking to sell, which creates a greater opportunity. Biggest issues we haven't really talked about is still affordability.
Yeah.
And actually, you know, which is a big thing that I think needs. I know Skipton put that article out this week about only 1 in 8 first-time buyers can actually
Buy in
afford.
their local area.
Afford a home, and with an income of below 22,000, that drops to 1 in 100. Wow. And it only goes to 44% with salaries at 71,000. So we have some other problems that need to be supported as well. So yeah.
I think it's one thing you've proven when I've just listened to all of you sitting here. I put myself in a buyer's position and thought to myself, well, why would I engage with politics? Because we don't understand what's going on. We can't understand it. And you guys live in this industry of mortgages and property, and we can't definitively sit here and say anything about these policies, anything that's going forward to be positive about it. Can you even imagine being a buyer sitting there waiting, thinking, what's my future going to be? Is it any wonder they're disengaged? So fingers crossed, we'll get some more detail. And that's it. We've run out of time again. Tony, just quickly, we've already announced Lee's promotion on here.
Yeah.
But we've got some data coming out soon. So next podcast, we might just have something to talk about. Fingers crossed. Well, you know, you can't talk about what it is, but
Yes, absolutely.
we'll make it
No,
the
we've
theme
been
of the next
doing
one.
we've been doing some research which ties into certainly a number of the subjects we've talked about today. So yeah.
So that was just
looking
me
forward to
queuing up what we're doing next month.
Yeah.
So I'm just praying that. Raoul and Anna, thank you so much for
Pleasure.
joining
Very
us.
much, thank you.
Good first time round. Wasn't as bad as you
absolutely.
thought
Yes,
it was
thank
did
you.
it?
Not as bad as I thought.
No, we
That's
don't
what
bite.
England
We don't bite, not generally. And Anna, thank you as always.
Pleasure.
It's been a joy. And Lee, nice to have you
you.
with us.
Thank you. No, it's been great.
And we do miss you, Phil. When you come, Phil will be back with us next month, I believe, wouldn't he?
Yes, absolutely.
And Tony's not going on another holiday yet.
Well, I am soon, but I think
Knew it.
that I am here. I'm here for the next podcast.
Okay.
I'm off in between that.
Well, that's it for us for this month. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or any of the audio podcast channel, you pop over to Spotify and you can watch the video version. So if you have listened to this, you want to catch up with some bits, you can watch us talking as well. Do sign up for it. Just click a follow link just so you get notifications. And every time it comes out on the first of every month, your phone will give you a notification and you'll know we're here. Thanks for listening or watching, and we'll see you again on the 1st of September. Okay, bye.